for this week. And today, to start our Black in Cardio 2021, we are hosting Dr. Michael Penn as our keynote speaker. Dr. Penn is one of the most impressive scientists and venture capitalists in our community. He has done an incredible amount of work both in mentoring and in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in industry and in academia. He held a Bachelor of Science in Biology from HBCU Morehouse. He then received an MD and a PhD in Biomedical Science at UCSF. Dr. Penn began his career at Genentech, working in marketing and business development, where he led cross-functional team to support product launches, technology due diligence, creative deal structuring, and the company's personalized medicine strategy. After Genentech, he was recruited to become a vice president at the Gladstone Institute, where he led multiple functions, including diversity, outreach, fundraising, PR, communication, marketing, and leadership development. He was later selected to become the CEO of the Gladstone Foundation, directing an operation that raised over $10 million annually. He has served as an advisor for TechMed, Hope Lab, and to Diversity and Innovation Film Culture Shift Lab, where he co-lead the inclusive healthcare ecosystem. The country's largest community of diverse healthcare executive, entrepreneur, and investor. Dr. Penn was also appointed by the former Mayor Willie Brown to serve as one of the 7 commissioners responsible for governing San Francisco Department of Public Health. He co-authored the book Finding Your North and was co-founder of the nonprofit Building Diversity in Science, an organization that encourages students of color to pursue a career in science. He's the founding father of Health Equity Venture, an emerging investment fund seeking to unlock top quartile return by investing in diverse entrepreneur and disruptive companies focused on addressing the enormous unmet need of underserved population. He currently sits on the board of trustees at St. Francis Memorial Hospital, a Common Spirit Health Community Hospital, and is board member for the Women's Health Focused Tara Health Foundation. Finally, Dr. Penn has received multiple awards, including the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award. Today, we are having a fire chat with Dr. Penn. And welcome again, Dr. Penn. We're really, really grateful to have you with us today. So I'll start with a couple of questions, but I will invite our audience to ask their question at any time. So please feel free to post your question in the Q&A. We will either ask the question directly to Dr. Penn or unmute participants to allow them to ask their questions. So I'll let you. I have a couple of questions to start off, but welcome again, Dr. Penn. We are really, really excited to have you today.
Me too. Thank you very much for the invitation. And, you know, I have to say that whenever I hear people read aspects of my bio, it's still, I still marvel that I've been able to do the things that I've done. And it's like this out of body experience. It's like, who is that person? That sounds really impressive, but oh, that's me.
I think you are truly a role model for all of us trainee, and we are really grateful that we talk today and probably give opportunity to our trainee and our audience to ask you anything they think would be helpful for them.
I'm here for you guys.
So I'll start with the first question. Tell us more about your journey, more specifically your time in the industry and then in academia and as a commissioner for San Francisco Public Health.
Yeah, you know, so I feel like, I mean, one of the themes that I want to just highlight early is the opportunities that I've had have felt like I've been called towards something. So there was the aspect of, oh, I'm either interested in this or curious about this, but there was definitely something more than that, it was like this pull. So to start with, I had the great fortune of interning at a lab, doing a summer internship at a lab at Genentech between finishing at Morehouse College and then starting at UCSF. And so that was where I got my introduction to biotech. And what I found interesting is I think during that summer, Genentech had a product approved by the FDA. And so it was just in a time of a lot of energy, high energy, and, connecting the dots from, basic science in the lab to, a marketed product, right, that was going to really impact patients' lives. So what I loved about industry was the scale of resources that they had access to, and we all can, I think, appreciate that working in different labs. It was like a factor of 10 to 50 higher, right, in terms of the resources that you had.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing. And then, it was, in academia, you may or may not have the benefit of recognizing kind of the impact that your science may have. And so working at Genentech, I was on the marketing team for a breast cancer monoclonal antibody known as Herceptin. And so part of my job was to understand from community oncologists, right, cancer physicians, about their experience prescribing this medication for women with a really aggressive form of breast cancer. And it was an amazing product to the point where, you think about kind of the science. So there's a receptor on the surface of this aggressive form of breast cancer known as HER2. And so the monoclonal antibody targets HER2 and enables the body to get rid of those cells. But to translate, you think about the decades of research, right, around HER2 biology and understanding that, to then, sitting in these advisory board meetings with community physicians, hearing them rave about how this targeted therapy has literally given women, many, many more months of life, right? Because HER2 breast cancer was a death sentence, right, prior to Herceptin. And so to have that kind of visible impact has been amazing. So industry I loved. So I worked in marketing and business development. Business development was the part of the company that did strategic kind of collaborations and licensing transactions. So our job was to source innovations outside of Genentech and bring them in to either add new drugs to the pipeline or help drugs move through the pipeline more quickly. But I've always loved innovation, and just the scale of impact was really what attracted me to industry. But then, I left Genentech and then came back to the Gladstone Institutes, where I actually did my graduate work, and where Catherine will be joining as a faculty member.
Yes, very excited.
Oh, so excited for you. And, it was interesting. So I loved being back in sort of an academic environment for so many reasons. One, graduate students and trainees, right, and postdocs, sort of seeing that next generation of scientists was wonderful, right? So I got a chance to mentor a lot more, but also, to really understand kind of the inner workings of science, right, in an independent research institute. And then to develop leadership skills. This was my first leadership role. I sort of had the fancy title, and, I thought I had put kind of being a vice president or being a CEO at this, on this pedestal. And, it's not all that special, y'all. I mean, it is and it's not, and so it was a wonderful experience. It was kind of a baptism by fire. I went from an individual contributor at Genentech to leading a team of over 30 people at Gladstone. And it's a true testament to, and I felt the same way when I got appointed to the San Francisco Health Commission, which is like, what the hell am I doing here? Did they really give me this job or this opportunity? And yet somehow left foot, right foot, we figure out how to make our contributions. And so I think, the skill sets that we develop as scientists to, rapidly synthesize a lot of information, to quickly acquire new skills and techniques, right? That toolbox is incredibly valuable, right, for your careers. And it gives, I think, us a level of confidence in exploring the unknown that's pretty unique.
Definitely, yeah. That's pretty amazing. I think we will all agree that you undermine that your incredible accomplishment, but because I think it's because of your amazingness and your ability to do a great work that you had all these higher up position, as you're saying.
Yeah, and I will say that, one of the themes I also want to highlight is this transition from an academic environment where, the emphasis, there's a lot more collaborative science that's done today, right, than, when I was a graduate student. But there's still this emphasis on, what did you do, right? You're the first author or you're the last author, right, if you're a faculty person. And so it's very egocentric. And business is different. It's not that there isn't egocentrism in business, but the team dynamic is much more necessary to get work done and to have impact, on the industry side. And that transition to more team-based way of thinking and way of working was a little bumpy for me. And there were numerous times when, all I could think about was, how is this going to make me look? How is this going to advance my career? And how, right? Like, what am I going to do? And people did like that. I probably almost got fired a number of times because I didn't, it took me a while to make that transition. And so one of the lessons, I know one of the other questions you'll ask at some point is, for people who are interested in industry, just recognize that it really is a fundamentally different culture, and, kind of turn on your scientific observational skills when you start, so that you learn and can observe what the culture is and how to succeed.
That's great. I was actually planning to ask you that, and more now that I'm thinking about it, how would you advise someone to, like, especially our trainee in basic science world? I think with your background of PhD as well as MD, so you have the clinical and the basic science or more science part. And how will you advise someone who is a scientist but think about not only going to industry but also using what they learn in lab to do things like business, marketing, and or communication? Because I know there are a lot of our community that are interested in science communication, marketing, business, but because we are very focused in our science in the lab, it can look like an impossible thing to do. And I think you're the perfect example of you can do all those things if you want.
Yeah. No, it really is true. And to be transparent, I still run up against my own perceived boundaries, right? Like, oh, I can't do that, or I can't do this. And, one of the best things I can say is just try, right? Like, really challenge yourself to, it's almost like challenge yourself to think beyond your perceived boundaries, leverage friends, mentors, right, who really see you beyond where you see yourself, and just take on at face value that perception and just, try it on and try to operate from that place. Because as I look back at my life, when I've given myself permission to think beyond my perceived limits, I've always gone beyond them. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'll never forget one of the stories that I remember from med school was kind of the night before, and I'm sure many of you have had this experience, right? The night before an exam or something, right? There's the 20% that's in your brain, and then there's the 80% that's still right in your notes or in the book. And somehow, your brain clicks in and it's like, oh, if I want to do well on this test, I got to get, as much of that 80% as I can into my, and then somehow it happens, right? Like you kind of make that internal decision, right? And it's subtle, but it's profound in its impact, right? You just decide that that's what you got to do and you're going to do it. And then it happens. Not always the way that we want, right? But there's this gear that you can rise up to. So I've forgotten the question. We're talking about industry and how, right? Like how, so, when I think about people wanting to make that transition either to industry from a science standpoint, thankfully today, there are well-worn paths, right? So if you want to do science in industry, right, there's never been a better time. There never been as many jobs as there are. I mean, it's really an amazing, a true renaissance period, I think, for biotech. And if you're interested in functions other than science, right, whether they're business-related functions or communication-related things, again, there are many, many well-worn paths, right? There's so many folks that you now can identify, right, have PhDs and have done postdocs, who are communications professionals in a variety of different companies, whether it's a biotech company or even, an advertising agency. And I guess what I would say is, that you talked about that distance, right? It seems like it's so far away. And, that's how it feels. And that's completely normal and to be expected. And just like many of you have either gotten to the PhD or through the PhD or to a postdoc and through a postdoc, it all starts with just one step at a time, and an intention for where you want to go. So, remind yourself that, look at where you are now, right? And 5 years ago, it would have been harder to imagine, right? Hard to imagine where you are now. And so really our careers and our lives are very much like that.
Thank you. I think what I'm retaining here at mainly 3 points. The first one, I really like when you are in school and you have to pass that exam and you have just 20% in your brain and 80% remaining in the books, and you're like, I gotta go through this, and then somehow you make it happen. I really like that a lot. I think a lot of us will identify themselves in there, and I do identify myself. And I think those are the little moments that can remind you that you can get there. You just have, and so that's the first thing. Just remember how you went through with your exam. And then I think the second thing I really like is you just have to try. Trying. So because that's how you big opportunity. That's how we will obtain things I would have never thought about. And I really think that's great. And the third thing is identifying people that like you went through the career that you're interested in. I think today, I would agree with you. People like you and people like Dr. Adrian at Stanford, and a lot of, like, there are a lot of, especially in our Black communities, there are a lot of, we have a lot of great scientists in a lot of different areas that our trainees can identify today and feel like, yes, if they did that, we can get there as well. We just have to try. And I think this is amazing. And thank you so much for those advice.
No, you're welcome. I think the other thing that comes to mind, I'll be very, so as I think I mentioned to you previously, mental health is a huge, huge issue for me. I mean, it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I had a really severe episode of anxiety and depression when I was making that transition from finishing my PhD and going back to medical school. And, as people of color, we often don't give ourselves the space to be human, let alone fail, right? And so that's what was at the core for me of that episode of depression. It was, everything that I was connected to my accomplishments rather than the human being that I was.
Wow.
And so when my brain basically was trying to communicate to me, dude, you need to take a break, right? I am worn out. You've just been pushing me to the limits for years now, right? Like, can I just take a vacation? Can I breathe? It shut down on me. And so all of a sudden, this thoroughbred, right, that was sort of in my skull was slowing down. And the shame that I felt around not achieving like I had previously, it was really devastating at the time, but it was important because I needed to learn in a pretty profound way that life's got to be about more than what you accomplish. It really does have to be that.
I think this is very, very important point, and thank you so much for bringing that up. We have to remember that our health is more important, and more specifically our mental health. And I think a lot in our community, we are so much into how to proving that we can make this, we are great, we are everything, that we tend to put our mental health at the second place. And this does not help to move forward. And I think that's really an amazing advice.
And it's not weakness. That was the other piece, right? Like
Yes.
I at the time, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't let people down. At the time, I was the only African-American in the MD PhD program. And so you could imagine the pressure I felt, because I ended up taking 9 months off because that's how much rest I needed.
Wow.
And so, gosh, if I had been able to talk to my younger self, one of the things I would have said is pace yourself, right? Like, what are you actually rushing to? Right? Enjoy.
I think this is very important.
Ass down, Michael. Come on.
That's great. That's amazing, because look at how much you accomplish and look at the pressure you put on yourself before. So this is, again, to our audience, just remember, it's never too late. Like, stopping and take care of yourself will just only make you a better person. And I think that's one thing I'm really taking from here. It's very powerful. Thank you again for sharing that. I think it's just showing us that you are just a human, like you say, like everyone else, and you have your weakness. And again, mental health is not a weakness. It's a part of yourself, and you have to take care of it. And I think this is really, really powerful. So I'll pause here for my question, and I will remind everyone that we are broadcasting on live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. So you probably have a lot of other audience there, and some of our members are actually looking around to see if there are questions coming from there. So I will see. So just again, I just want to remind our audience to please ask your question, whether it's on social media or people that are in our listening to us from the Zoom link directly. And we'll either, for people on here, we'll either unmute you to ask your question, or we can directly ask the question to Dr. Penn. So as I'm waiting, is there any question in the audience? Please feel free to put your question down. So I think for now, I don't have any question in the audience.
On y'all.
Yes, please ask your question. And so I just give a few minutes to our audience, maybe our attendees, maybe ask their question while I'm getting my next question ready.
Cool.
So I'll go ahead and ask my next question. Okay, so I think a lot of what I had in the mind, you already covered some of them. A lot of them actually. But there is one thing I will be interested in hearing from you. So you have, of course, as we have heard so far, you have an impressive curriculum and expertise in various areas. But two things that I think come the most are mentoring and leadership and promoting DEI. So my question is, before really getting into what do that mean, but what are really the decisions that lead you to taking that specific path?
Yeah, I wish there was a straightforward answer to that. I think one important decision really happened around the period of my depression in medical school. And that was what became clear in therapy, right, during that 9 months, is that I was living my life for everyone else but me, right? So I wasn't really thinking about what would actually make Michael Penn happy. I was thinking about what would make my community proud, what would make my parents proud, right? All these things. And so through that time off, I committed to following sort of my authentic path, right? And the name of the book that I published with Dr. Fred Moore is called Finding Your North, right? Not anyone else's, right? What is your North Star? And, I think that decision, that commitment, right, to follow my own North Star came through pain, right? It was really difficult to sort of work through that. But that was a big one. I think the other decision that I made was to honor and follow my curiosity. So, it's interesting because, the path to science, right, for a scientific career is very linear, right? You do this, and you do that, and you do this for X number of years. And so you could imagine how scary, well, I know many of you are probably feeling this way now, right? It's scary to jump off of that defined path.
Yes.
And, in retrospect, right, I can see those decisions as courageous decisions, but in the moment, I framed it like failure, right? Like, maybe I just couldn't hack it as I wasn't tough enough to embrace a career as a faculty person, or, I wasn't smart enough to, keep all this information in my head as to manage the patients, right, that I was following as a student. That's how I thought about it at the time. But now that I look back, it's like, no, my spirit was kind of saying, this isn't fitting, right? Like, in terms of what's important to you, Michael, these paths don't resonate, right? And in the way that they needed to. And so in some ways, I couldn't pursue them, right? I couldn't, like, there was just something in me that, right, there was a barrier. And then giving myself permission to follow my curiosity is ultimately what led me to, biotech and Genentech. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, so, to your point about DEI, I had responsibility for diversity and inclusion when I was at the Gladstone Institutes. And I didn't want that. Like, at the time, I felt like diversity and inclusion had this stigma attached to it, right? Like it wasn't viewed as rigorous or, right? Like, and I also viewed it as something that was very personal, right? Like that was my personal time, my volunteer time, that kind of thing. But to have it be something that I was responsible for, right? So it was like I kind of judged it, and it scared me because it's hard, right? So it's like, if you're gonna judge me, right? If I'm gonna have goals, it's really hard. But what I ended up doing is embracing that responsibility. And so one question that I continually ask myself, really almost every week now, and it's really discerning for me, is what is mine to do, right? Because there's lots of stuff to do, right, in the world. The world needs a lot of stuff, but it's like, what is ours to do? What's mine to do? What's yours to do? And the way that I think about it is, it's either something that you get called for, right? So like when the mayor said, I want you to join the health commission, I didn't want that, right? And I didn't think I could do that, but I said yes to it, right? And I was able to make a meaningful contribution. So that's one. Sometimes you get called and you're just like, right, I don't know. But then you surrender to, there's something for me to do here, right? And you just, again, trust yourself. The other piece is sometimes you're just curious and it won't let you go. And that's what, for me, business was. Like, I was just always curious about it. I wanted to know more. I wanted to, and so it was that. It wasn't, I couldn't have articulated it as a passion at the time. But, and then the other piece is what's yours to do often will depend on skills, talents, or superpowers that only you have. And so it's that combination of, when you get to invited to offer your unique skills or insight or experience, that's the way. But it doesn't always feel like a decision that you chose, right? Like a choice that you made. So it requires some discernment and reflection, but it's a powerful question. What's yours to do?
That's amazing. I think I wanted to follow up on the DEI, and I don't want to do that, but you have to embrace it at some point, or you embrace it. I want to follow up on that, but I will hold on because Adama has a question, and I would like to allow her to ask your question. So I might just maybe unmute Adama and allow her to ask questions. So how do I do this? So, well, I think, yes, you can go ahead, Adama.
Hi, okay. This has been so inspiring. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hosting. Thank you, Dr. Penn. I've just been really inspired by everything you said, and I guess I'm currently a research technician, so very early trying to figure out what I want to do next, but I'm also interested in quite a lot of things. So I like science, I like outreach, I like social media and design stuff. I like talking to people. So a lot of things I find myself interested in. Yep. But there's one thing that sticks with me sometimes. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I've gone through a certain thing, and if I don't use it immediately, I would have wasted my time. And as as you've gone through medicine, academia, tech, so many cool things, how have you dealt with your journey and not feeling like you've wasted your time in terms of the things you've done and not using them all the time. So how do you like go through that process?
Yeah, I love that question. So it's interesting. One of the things so I'll be 49 on the 29th of this month. And, as the decades increase, you start being able to see patterns or cycles in life. And, it's interesting. I had kind of my PhD time, that was a science cycle. And then I did my 2 years of clinical rotations, and that was the clinical cycle. And then I went to Genentech, and it was kind of a mix, but I leaned more on my clinical education. And then I guess I'm just trying to think about whether I ever felt like I was leaving a piece behind. To some degree, yeah, like when I was on the marketing team, right, there was a huge emphasis on patients. I mean, there was a little bit of science, but ultimately, right, it was a marketed product. And so it was all about patient impact and, right, how many patients were taking the drug or how long were they taking the drug. And it wasn't until I moved over to business development where science became more prominent, right? Like, what's the mechanism of action for this particular drug, or what's the technology that underlies this diagnostics platform or this small molecule discovery engine. And so, yeah, like I did start to feel towards the latter part of my marketing time that I was missing the science and vice versa. So yeah, that will happen. But what's so awesome, I think about, Health Equity Ventures is the name of my investment firm. And, in any given week, I can talk to an entrepreneur about digital health. But just yesterday, I was talking to a Black physician who has a biotech company. And it's really, really sophisticated science. And so what I love about my work in venture capital is that it integrates me, right? So I'm integrating the public health piece, I'm integrating the DEI piece, I'm integrating science and clinical. And so I do think that, at some point in your career, because I think the fact that you're interested in all of these things has meaning, right? You're here for a reason. You may not discover fully what that reason is, but if you open to serving that, right, purpose, I think you'll find in your life that those things will end up coming together in ways that you couldn't imagine. And it's really wonderful. I think each year I am on this earth, I appreciate more of who I am. And this year, I'm actually, it's almost a practice for me. I'm also trying to embrace the things about myself that I don't necessarily like all that much, because that has value too, right? And so, and I've learned the hard way that if I either ignore or suppress those aspects of myself that I don't like, they find a way to kind of creep up and wreak havoc. So word to the wise, like just really embrace all of who you are, even and this is a harder practice, but approach it with curiosity. Like, I wonder why I do that to myself all the time, right? Like, what's that about? Versus, I can't believe I did that again, right? So that was my learning. Thank you for your question, Adama.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've noted so much down, so thank you.
Thank you, Adama, and thank you, Dr. Penn, for this wonderful answer. I will go back to my question about DEI, and I think this is a question a lot of us, especially in our Black community, in a preliminary right enrollment, we feel when we feel like there is a specific assignment that is given to us all the time, which is DEI. It's almost like you have to take care of advocating for yourself and for everyone else all the time because you are the only one, but also the place where you are at, it feels like they will identify you as a person who have to do that job. So have you felt during the time when you started, because I think now it's mostly something you feel, I mean, if I'm not wrong, it's something you feel like you really want to do, you really want to shed the light in our community and help people of color to like move forward and do something that they're really passionate about. But at the time you started this, have you felt like there was sort of a minority tax, or you were assigned that because of who you are, or because of your color, or because you were like maybe the only minority person in the environment and who is like the best person to do this work?
No, it's interesting because while I certainly acknowledge the existence of the minority tax, I just never felt that way.
That's great.
It has always been my joy to do this work, right? Like literally my joy. So if like I would have been doing it whether the institution asked me to or not, right? Like it's just something that was that important to me. But I also remember the dean of or the director of admissions at UCSF, was counseling me, was one of my mentors, actually Michael Drake, who's now the president, or is it chancellor of UC, the entire UC system.
Yeah.
His warning was, like, make sure you take care of your academics first, right? Like, I appreciate that you're doing this work and feel called to do this work, but you are a student. And but what I found is that it made me a better student, right? Like that full expression. But we're all different. And so, what I would never want is for someone to feel guilty, right? That if they're not called to do that, like, and this is part of honoring who we are, right? If you're not called to do that, don't do it, because it's only going to take up a cognitive load, right? And an energetic load that you could be devoting to something else. And all of us have, again, what's ours to do, right? And if mentoring or being active and outreach is not your jam, right? Like, keep on moving, right? Find what your jam is, because we need everybody to do their part. And some of us, we need to heads down, completely focus on your science because you're after the Nobel Prize, right? Or the Lasker, or, whatever it might be. So there's a role for all of us.
I think that's a great advice. Really find what you are excited about and make sure you do that. And if you feel like that's not something calling you, just don't do it.
Yeah. And, and to just unpack that a little bit more, what I noticed for myself has been, it's exhausting following a path because you think you should, right? And over time, it actually undermined my confidence, right? So, and I'll give you an example. So, at the time I was working in business development at Genentech. BD jobs are some of the most coveted jobs in biotech.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I thought I was, doing my thing. I'd made it to business development, and like in some ways it was kind of the pinnacle. And I found myself, I was good at it, but not great at it. And yet my colleagues were great at it. Like the department I was in, like really emphasized mastery, right, of the deal. And in some ways, because I had put this role, this job on a pedestal, I didn't actually pay enough attention to the fact that, like, dude, you're not really shining in this context, right? Like, I learned the skill and I was competent, but I wasn't, it wasn't my superpower. And the piece that I think is important for all of us to remember is that, you know, we want to put ourselves in the best possible position to make our contribution. And to use another Gladstone example, Deepak Srivastava is the current president of Gladstone. You know, and he's someone that I look up to because I feel like he has superpowers. Like when I hear him give a talk, when I hear him either hold a town hall meeting, it is so clear that he was put on the earth to do exactly what he's doing, right? Or Jennifer Doudna is someone who came to speak at Gladstone when I was there. She was still at Berkeley. Again, like it was so clear to me, and talk about someone who's committed to diversity and inclusion, she really is. But it was just so clear to me that she was answering the invitation, right? Like her calling was exactly what she had chosen. And there's an effortlessness because now I do feel like, because I've opened up to all of who I am and said yes to that, right? Yes to doing the things that are mine to do. There is an effortlessness that I experience and a joy that I experience that is absolutely wonderful. And so if there's one thing I can encourage, you know, each of you today to really think about is I want everyone to experience that feeling, and I want the world to experience contributions made from that place. Because it really, it's like a win-win for everybody, right? You're doing good for the world and you feel great in the process.
I think that's amazing. That's really great. We have one question from Jace from social media. I think it's Twitter. So I'll let Deborah ask the question.
I realized that I was already unmuted. I hope I did not make any noise.
You're fine.
So Jess has a question. He said, how do you cope with trying to be the best you can professionally, focus on your research while taking on DEI work that your non-Black peers wouldn't necessarily do because it doesn't impact them?
So I would, so for me, and we're all different, right? So for me, doing the DEI work made me a better scientist. Like that's how I experienced it. And for me, so, okay, this is deep, y'all.
We like deep.
What we pay attention to grows. So if we focus our attention on what white folks don't have to do that we have to do, or we focus on the ways that they're advantaged and we're disadvantaged, it's less productive than focusing on the things that we can do constructively, right? So what I would encourage you is to maybe reframe and just think about what's on your plate right now and how, you know, how is your level of performance today meeting your expectations? And if it is, and you have the additional capacity, go for it. But if excellence is what you're after and you find that a certain level of outreach or volunteer work as it relates to diversity has diminishing returns, then you need to honor that aspect of yourself. But I really try to focus on the things that I'm for rather than the things that I'm against. just energetically, it just works better for me. And so I invite each of you to think about that from an energetic standpoint, because, you know, obviously these last few years and, you know, life as a person of color certainly has its challenges. I've just found that for me, when I focus on the things that I'm grateful for, it's just a more powerful energy, positive energy for me.
I think this speaks a lot. I mean, thank you so much for sharing this. I think this speaks a lot it speaks to a lot of us. And I will agree that we tend to be like, oh, this, the comparison. And I think even in our world of science, we tend to try to compare ourselves with our peer. This person did this much, why don't I? And I really like the way you bring it. It's instead of having this negative energy consuming ourselves, it's better to think, what is good for me? What do I want? Where do I want to go? And how can I get there? And this actually, I like this actually bringing back to the minority tax that I has as a question for you, because this is what happens. A lot of us sometimes feel like, I really don't want to do this DI because I'm the only person, and I feel like I'm pressed by doing. I'm forced to do it. And what you are saying is, don't ever feel forced to do something you don't want to. Focus your energy on what makes you happy rather than what consumes you. And I hope a lot of us in our audience will really take this home, because for me, it's very powerful. I think this is a great advice. And I often myself try to move the negative energy as far as I can, because I feel like it consumes me and it doesn't help my mental health.
No, it's so true. And I think the other piece is, you know, at the end of the day, success in DEI requires everyone. And so, you know, for those of you who do feel called to say, you know what, like I'm not going to, you know, I'm going to conserve my energy and my focus, right, for my work. Sometimes it's the responsibility of the institution to step up, right? Like it doesn't always need to sit on our shoulders. So, you know, it's not a bad thing if the institution either has to be embarrassed or has to really mobilize an effort, right? Because that's ultimately, as I live, I realize, you know, the biggest catalysts for change that I've seen at the institutional level are often because people are concerned about their reputation, right? And or there's some legal, you know, case that ends up, you know, forcing the institution to look at its culture. So
so I think we have two questions. So I'll give the floor to Shanice to ask her question, and then Deborah will ask her question before we end. And I feel like 1 hour is not even enough to go through everything.
Never is, I know.
So much for sharing everything. So I'm just going to leave the floor to Shanice to ask her question.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Penn. I'm definitely enjoying your talk. I guess my question, you kind of mentioned this, I guess, throughout the talk, but I guess I wanted to get, I guess, a little bit more information or just like hear some more thoughts on this. But I just noticed, like, you're saying, you know, you're kind of thinking about your values as you go through your career, and you're making these, for me, I would say, like, huge, you know, jumps in your career that have been like very, I guess, like very valuable and also like, I don't know, and very impactful. And so I guess for me as an academic, I'm a postdoc. Like you said, the academic route is very linear. But how do you, I guess, how do you know when it's time to like make that jump, you know, either from academia to industry, and then you were able to go from the industry to more in the academic space? And then how did you, I guess, like, how did you gain the bravery to kind of take this on?
So here's the confession. Without sort of betraying confidentiality and stuff like that, let's just say that, you know, we don't always get to choose the transitions that we make. Okay. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And so this is where, there's this dance that we have with life, right? Because you can't control everything, right? Despite, the fact that you can control many things in the experiments that you design. Life, not so much. And so, there's two words. One word that really comes to mind is surrender. So like, when I left Genentech, I didn't want to leave Genentech. Genentech, again, it was like the best company that I thought I could work for. It was kind of the center of the universe in my mind. And we had gotten acquired by Roche, like fully. And so the culture started to change and, people started to move around. And so, it was just time. And so again, it's remembering that life really happens in cycles. And the larger arc, Shanice, is life actually always has our back, even though we feel like it's kicking our butts sometimes. If you believe, I don't know if you're spiritual or whether or not, like I've just found that life tends to work if you trust it. So these transitions, like I was concerned when I went back to Gladstone, whether that would impact, like would that limit, if I wanted to go back into industry, et cetera, but those were just thoughts in my head. And I think if you just focus on, again, what's yours to do, and, be a scientist, right? Like, as if you take a job and you have an experience, you're gathering data and you either like that experience or not so much. And so that's data that you can use to make different choices, right? Moving forward. And so that's the beauty of it, right? Which is there's really no failure as I see life now, because you'll always get data back and we're always at choice. And I think there are enough examples of people making pivots and moves successfully, even if it is uncomfortable.
Nice.
I hope
Thank
that
you.
answered your question, Shanice.
No, yes, it definitely did. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to give the floor to Deborah to ask her question as well.
So since we are running out of time, it's just a quick question. So what advice would you give to trainees or others interested in starting their own company? Because we've seen the disparities in just funding startups by people of color and Black people. So what advice would you give trainees like me or other trainees if they were to start their own company one day?
Yeah, it's very simple. Just do it. We need you. If it crosses your mind more than once, just do it. And, trust in the timing, right? So I'm not saying do it right now per se, right? But we have to do it. And so it's interesting. The one thing I do want people to know is that there are so many more founders and entrepreneurs of color than I would have ever imagined, right? And I'm still just kind of getting started with Health Equity Ventures, but and there, you cannot imagine the joy that I experience, right? Looking at a person, right, who reflects an aspect of myself, pitching their company. It's amazing. The last thing I'll say, so that I'm not a liar, is I got interviewed by the San Francisco Business Times a few months ago, and they asked me this question about, what are your goals with Health Equity Ventures? Is there a certain number of entrepreneurs that you want to invest in over a period of time? And so he just threw out the number 100, right? Like 100, investing in 100 Black entrepreneurs or diverse entrepreneurs in the next 5 years. So y'all, please don't make me a liar. It's in black and white. But there's really a tremendous, it's a great time, I think, to just be walking the earth despite all the challenges. And there have never been more founders of color in healthcare, in digital health, in biotech. And so you're not alone. And there are folks out there who can help illuminate the path for you.
Great, thank you so much. So we all heard, please try, if you want to start your own company, you know who to contact for funding and for, because he said he's gonna fund at least 100
over 5 years. We have to do this.
So please do that. Please don't make him look bad. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really grateful for you to come and talk and have this conversation with us at the Black in Cardio. And I'm also very grateful to start this week with you. I just want to remind everyone that we have a whole bunch of other panel coming up throughout the week. So stay tuned, and we're looking forward to have everyone tomorrow. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Penn, for this time. It was amazing. I did enjoy it a lot, and I'm sure our audience did as well.
Well, we'll have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you, Black in Cardio, because the fact that you're bringing folks together is so amazing. And I would have never imagined that this would have happened, but here we are, and here you are. So thank you for that work.
Thank you. And here we are at the end of our webinar. See you all tomorrow, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Ending the conversation. Thank you so much.